The desert state of Rajasthan has been a revolving door for Chief Minister since 1993. The BJP and the Congress have held power in the state in turns for the last several years, which is why holding on to the CM's chair will be no mean feat for Vasundhara Raje. Let's begin first by taking a look at how the Rajasthan Assembly is stacked up. Now, elections for the 200-odd seats that make up the Rajasthan Assembly are going to be held on the 7th of December. Results, of course, will be with all the other 4 states on the 11th of December. 101 is the magic number in the state of Rajasthan, and in 2013 Vasundhara Raje had more than enough. She swept the elections with 160 seats out of 200. We're giving her the credit because she was the face of those elections, though a lot of it was down to the Modi wave as well. The Congress, of course, was left with just 25 seats. And why is it being called a push for the Modi wave? Well, the vote shares in the last elections of 2013 hold the key to that answer. Because if you look at how the BJP performed in 2003, when they had a 39% vote share, in 2008 they had a 34% vote share. Of course, the Congress won that election with 37%, but in 2013 they had a 45% vote share. So even though the incumbent chief minister at that time, Ashok Gehlot, was not being criticized too much for his governance, but he seemed to have no hope in the sweep of that Modi wave. So what are the key factors this time around, and why is Vasundhara Raje looking shaky? Well, to speak more on that, I'm joined now by Rajan Mahan, professor at the University of Rajasthan. Thank you so much, Mr. Mahan, for speaking with us. Let's begin by asking the obvious question. Why is Chief Minister Vasundhara Raje seeming like she has her back to the wall at this point in the election campaign?
Well, I would say that, the perception has been built up especially strongly after February. There were, 3 by-elections in Rajasthan, 2 for Lok Sabha seats, which count for about 16 assembly seats, and 1 assembly seat. And the BJP not only lost all the 3 seats, but they were actually trounced in all the 17 assembly constituencies that covered the 2 Lok Sabha seats, that's 16 seats, and the 1 assembly seats. In all the 17, the ruling BJP in Rajasthan trailed rather badly, including in one of the parliamentary seats. It was a sitting minister of the Vasundhara government who got knocked out by more than 1 lakh of votes in Alwar. So, that created a huge buzz. And ever since then, the Vasundhara government has been a bit on the back foot. And also there are a range of factors because of which people believe that the Vasundhara government and the BJP actually don't have that much goodwill going in as they go. But we must remember that in 2008, when Vasundhara Raje was the chief minister and fought the elections in 2008, she did give the Congress a very, very close fight. So despite all the pundits kind of predicting that the BJP may well be on a very, very sticky wicket, it's not completely a lost case for the BJP in Rajasthan, because the Congress itself is also suffering all kinds of problems within.
No, absolutely. We're going to come to that in just a bit. But I just wanted to touch upon a few points very quickly. And one of them is some of the work that Vasundhara Raje has done, or at least now takes credit for. And of course, the Bamsha health scheme is one example. It's also become sort of a pilot for the overall Ayushman Bharat scheme that the centre is trying to play out. Do you think that such schemes, and especially her women-centric schemes, are going to keep her more comfortable than is being predicted at this point?
It could be, because Bahama Shah has been a bit of a success. You can't deny that. But at the same time, even within the Bahama Shah scheme, which is the biggest sort of, positive that Vasundhara Raje and her government have been claiming, there have been problems of implementation. And the fact that, every person from a certain section or within the BPL families was being given this card and they could go to private hospitals and be treated for over 3 lakh rupees is something which is a huge credit to this government, but it's actually borrowed an old idea from the previous Congress government in the state, firstly. And secondly, the way it's got implemented on the ground, very often these private hospitals haven't actually behaved so well. So with the patients who've gone in. So quite often, even the Bhamasha scheme, when people have gone into those private hospitals, they've actually been fleeced of the money. Bills have been raised by those private hospitals, and yet the treatment that people were looking for has been rather elusive. So it could work the other way around also, but yes, Bhamasha and the fact that she has had a range of women-centric schemes could help Vasundhara Raje. The problem is that within her own party also, there are factions who are not particularly putting along too well with her, and that could well be. And the fact that for the past 5 years, there has been this lingering perception of trouble between the state government led by Vasundhara Raje and the central government led by the Modi and Shah combination, that the things haven't really been too smooth between those two sides, is a lingering perception, and that internal sort of Cold War that has gone on within the BJP is something that has affected public perceptions in Rajasthan, and there's been this strong perception that things are just lingering on, that there is no strong action, that a lot of issues have just not received the kind of attention from the government that they deserved, and therefore
that's an important point. That's an important point, because even her opponents have made a lot about this internal tussle with Amit Shah. We don't know how much of it is going to reflect on how much the ground forces really push for Vasundhara Raje. One gets a sense that the BJP may be willing to let this one go just to maybe put Vasundhara Raje in her place, but one never knows. I just want to quickly jump to the opponents, because the problem of internal tussles is something that the Congress once again faces in this state as well. You have Sachin Pilot being projected as the young dynamic leader. On the other hand, you have Ashok Gehlot, former chief minister, veteran leader, big state figure as well, who didn't have a very bad track record of governance. The friction between these two, or even the fact that there isn't a clear chief ministerial candidate, do you think that that could cost the Congress?
On the ground, there is this popular thing about Sachin Pilot being the young and dynamic face, the guy who can possibly be the future of the Congress, and it's certainly the future of the Congress in Rajasthan. But at the same time, for the moment, the Gehlot faction is not really willing to give up. Ashok Gehlot has quite often made it pretty obvious that he is very much in the race, despite the fact that he's the National General Secretary, has been playing a strong role for the Congress, both in the Gujarat and Karnataka elections, etc., etc. And therefore, the hope was that he would possibly take on a central role and Sachin would get the state leadership. But that has not actually panned out. And the bad blood, or the tension between the two groups within the Congress is something.
Let's move on to the key issues that voters will actually place their decision on. And before I come to that key point, I just want to put across some figures for you. And one of the reasons why, of course, unemployment is going to be such a huge issue in these elections. We talk about it on a pan-India level as well, but in Rajasthan as well. You will see that as per CMIE data that we have, between 2016 of January, when the unemployment rate was 6.8%, it has risen in October 2018 to 13.7%. And this is possibly going to be giving the Raje government sleepless nights as well if something is not done to address this. Professor Mahan, if I'm not mistaken, this is also a clear promise that Vasundhara Raje made before the last elections, didn't she? Saying that, unemployment is something that would be specifically worked on, jobs would be created.
Exactly. They had made a specific problem and given a specific figure of 15 lakh government jobs would be generated. Now, they're nowhere close to reaching that target. In fact, in her last budget, Vasundhara Raje mentioned that by December, which is before the elections actually come along, they will try and recruit another 1.5 lakh people. But even that has remained just a promise that hasn't actually turned into reality. The Rajasthan Public Service Commission here, for various government jobs, when they're holding tests, that itself has become a bit of a joke because, on one pretext or the other, they eventually end up not having any recruitments actually taking place. So jobs and the fact that they connect with the youth vote and, currently in Rajasthan, there are more than 65% who will be voting and who are going to be under 35. So that's a huge chunk of young people who have been looking for jobs in the past 5 years, haven't got them, and therefore there is this sense of restlessness, this sense of dissatisfaction with the government, and quite rightly so, because when you promise 15 lakhs and you don't deliver 5 lakhs, then the gap between what you promised and what you delivered is huge, and that could very well be a very key issue for people, especially the youth vote, which in the last election had voted en masse for the BJP, both because of Vasundhara Raje's own personal charisma, and secondly because, as you mentioned, the Modi wave, which was blowing so strongly all across the country, and Rajasthan being a border state with Gujarat, therefore the impact of the Modi wave was also very strong in Rajasthan. So I think the youth vote and how that could pan out is one of the biggest factors, and that could well go a little against the BJP, the way the current trends are going because of this huge unemployment crisis that Rajasthan has seen.
I want to touch upon a couple of other key issues with a little bit of specificity. One is, of course, agrarian distress. This is something that we're seeing as a common factor across various states in India. Of course, it will be a factor in the elections in Madhya Pradesh as well. But focusing on Rajasthan, the state did issue a farm loan waiver. Do you think that would have quelled apprehensions, or is Vasundhara Raje facing a huge issue in that sector as well?
She does seem to have problems even in the rural sector because, this is the time, what you mentioned that they have given as a kind of a loan waiver is something that hasn't delivered on the ground very well. And more significantly, this lack of delivery becomes more of a factor when you realize two things. One, in the entire history of Rajasthan, we haven't had farmers' suicides. It's in the past 5 years, 2015 to be precise, that for the first time Rajasthan was shaken because some farmers committed suicide. So obviously it should have deserved far greater attention, far greater support for the farming sector than what it received. And secondly, across the country, as you mentioned, in state after state, you can look at how, agriculture has been an ignored factor. Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, yes, that famous slogan. But while we've seen so much of mention of Jai Jawan in the past few years and this whole effort at generating a specific kind of nationalism through that, but I'm afraid Jai Jawan is something that has largely remained somewhat ignored. And in Rajasthan, for instance, to give you a specific concrete example, Hadoti, that is the region of Kota, Jhalawar, from where Vasundhara Raje herself comes, and she has been winning election after election from that region. There, garlic farmers have committed suicide, have had huge problems and issues this year. They were not given any MSP. If the government, what is the point of announcing an MSP if eventually the government is not going to buy their produce? So I think there is a huge crisis, and that is why the Congress, which has always been traditionally much stronger in rural areas, this time seems almost unbeatable.
Another key factor when you're talking about Rajasthan, and which you cannot really ignore, is the caste breakup. This is one of those states where caste considerations are very key, which is why we've just pulled up data of how the voting patterns looked after the Lok Sabha elections in 2014. We've picked 2014 because that was the last time this amount of people in the state went to vote and made their choices clear. Obviously, it was a Modi wave election, as it's being called. stupendous gains, and which is why we saw a huge support coming across castes. But even within that, important to note that the highest support came from the Brahmins and the Rajputs. The Jats, OBCs, of course, were with them as well. But relatively, Dalits and Muslims and tribals on a relative basis did not support the BJP as well. The Jats also, they got 50% of the vote. I want to ask Professor Mahan how key the caste breakup will be at this time, because when you get into that granular data, that's when the strategies come into play, and that sometimes makes all the difference on each individual seat.
Yes, indeed. And, that is where the picture is actually very complicated. You mentioned about the Rajput vote. Now, traditionally, the Rajputs have actually voted for the BJP in large numbers. This time around, will they vote en masse for the BJP? A little doubtful. Manvinder Singh, Jaswant Singh's son, revolting against the BJP is something which is very well known. But what is not so well known is the fact that there is this lingering sense of anger within the Rajput community for a variety of factors. One, this whole mishandling of the film Padmavati, where Rajput groups opposed, and then it was badly handled both within the state of Rajasthan and even outside. Second, very recently, when the BJP, after the by-elections in February, was to change its party president in Rajasthan, they were proposing, apparently Amit Shah and his group wanted to get a Rajput leader from within Rajasthan. In fact, the one name that was being floated was the Central Minister Gajendra Singh Shekhawat, who comes from the same region as Ashok Gehlot. And they wanted him to be the party president in Rajasthan. But because of Vasudha Raje's strong opposition, they couldn't make him. And eventually that has also led to a sense of disappointment within the Rajputs, who have been strong supporters of the BJP. But equally, the Jats, who have traditionally been a very strong vote bank for the Congress, which way they will swing is something which is perhaps one of the most tantalizing questions of this election. Because while they've traditionally voted for the Congress, there is a problem within the party, within the community, which is that they feel that in 70 years, there has not been a single Jat leader who has been made the chief minister of Rajasthan. So there is that sense. And secondly, there have been many sections within the Jat community who've shifted over to the BJP in the last couple of elections, 2013 state election, 2014 Lok Sabha elections. So will they continue to be with the BJP, despite the fact that on farm issues, because Jats are traditionally a farming community, the performance of the Raja government has hardly been spectacular. But many important, influential Jat leaders still continue to be with the BJP, are lobbying hard to ensure that the Jats don't switch over to the Congress again. So the caste mix is actually very, very tantalizing in Rajasthan, because the traditional vote banks are not exactly firmly in either the Congress's camp or in the BJP's camp. So it's actually the caste dynamics this time is going to be very complex and could well see some startling changes.
It's going to be difficult to judge because the last election where all of these castes voted was 2014, where the factors were very different. They were voting for a prime ministerial candidate. We'll have to see what factors influence them this time, and will there be decisions made based on caste? Thank you so much, Professor Mahan, for joining us and taking us through what is key to watch out for the Rajasthan elections. It's going to be a battle of the royals, and it's going to be definitely one exciting one, because there are such big personalities that are in the fray. Also a big test of how the Congress manages to solve these tricky situations within its party, where there's more than one player vying for the top spot.